Today I want to talk about something near and dear to my heart. Finding a good deal due to being unemployed. But more specifically, I'm going to be talking about old audio interfaces that seem good on paper based on what they can do, yet may or may not still be being sold for too much based on how they actually function. I'm going to talk about my experience with 4 different old audio interfaces, how I found them, how much they cost me, and how they actually work. So let's get into it. I'm going to start with the simplest audio interface to get to the more complex ones later. So first up, we have this Presonus Audiobox USB. It features 2 combo 1/4 and XLR input jacks. Phantom power for both jacks are controlled by one button, and it has the rest of your average I/O as far as I know. As you can see, it is in use, so I don't want to take it out just to remember all the features it has. But obviously, this is a good sign. There are many of these styles of audio interface on the used market, often for a pretty reasonable price. And most of them are actually even newer than the one I have here. However, what makes this one special to me is that I found it in a kit at my local Goodwill for $10. The kit had a blue XLR cord, a Presonus M7 condenser microphone, and the audio interface, and I believe a disc that was supposed to have a code to Studio One 2, but that just redirects to their site now, so no free old DAW for me, I guess. It was also supposed to have a set of headphones, which would have been cool, but for $10, what I got was pretty great. The mic works, I think the cord works, the disc is readable, even though I think it's useless now, I might have to look into that again. And of course, the audio interface works, as it's what I've been using to record all of my sat-down talking sections for my videos. In my CAD videos, my gaming videos, anything that has me recording at my desk has me talking through that interface. While it's been a great tool, it is not perfect though. I don't know what causes it, but rarely there are times where the interface will just start throwing in digital clicks, pops, and other anomalies. To me, since the anomalies are often so rhythmic, it may have something to do with the clock or something like that inside the interface. Restarting my computer doesn't fix it, unplugging and replugging from the interface last time didn't fix it, however for some reason unplugging and replugging from the computer did. But I also had to change USB ports due to not wanting to plug the USB back into the back of my computer, so that is also a factor. Either way, it's back to running optimally for now, and remains a valuable tool for me. From what I can find, the interface was released back in 2008 at the Winter NAMM show, so this interface is theoretically 17 to 18 years old now, and still going strong, though coughing from time to time. This series and model of interface lives on through the Presonus Audiobox USB 96 though. They even have a 25th anniversary edition available, which I guess was released back in 2020. So they're saying that the original system is at least 30 years old. Maybe my specific unit isn't quite that old, but man, it really does show how audio gear doesn't really change throughout time for the most part. The next audio interface is interesting. This is the Jamvox JV-1 monitor and audio interface made by VOX, the amplifier brand. I have another video talking about the history of this thing, how it works now, and even making an argument for a refreshed re-release of it because this thing came out in 2008 and VOX/Korg ended support for this thing back in 2012 or 2013. So it's been unsupported for over a decade. Yet, when I installed the driver on Windows 10 and 11, it worked like it came out of the factory yesterday. This was something I found while browsing Mercury, I think. When I saw it, I knew I had to check it out, especially that the price was decently low. I did more research and looked for more listings, and then I landed on this complete inbox set on eBay for a little less than $30. This interface has one 1/4 instrument input and an XLR microphone input, but it also features 2 3-inch dynamic speakers that you can use to monitor your sound, though this product was made specifically for VOX's Jamvox software at the time. So it also has ports on the back for an expression pedal and a switcher, though I don't know if these work in modern day because I don't have the proper accessories to test them. I contacted VOX/Korg support about the unit for some history on the product, if they were willing to help with that, and they openly gave me a few paragraphs of general knowledge about the system and requirements to get it up and running. They got me worried though, saying things like I would need to be running Windows 8.1 as an operating system at the latest to get it to work. So I was in the process of trying to make a virtual machine for this thing until I had a genius idea of just trying it on a normal system anyway. And what do you know? I had the disk, so the driver download wasn't hard, and after running that, the JV-1 connected flawlessly on my Windows 10 desktop. In one of the Jamvox downloads still available on the site, I think it was version 1.52 or something like that, I'm pretty sure there is still a driver somewhere in one of those download versions. Which is how I got the JV-1 to work on my Windows 11 laptop without a disk drive. I do have an external disk drive, but I wanted to see if I could get the monitor to work without using the disk, since most people wouldn't have the disk, let alone a drive to read it. But yeah, this thing is recognized as an audio input and audio output, and neither were hard to configure in my experience, but after finding the driver, of course. I've already said it before, but I really love this thing and really think VOX and Korg should work to update this thing to the modern age and reproduce it. Again, this thing was released in 2008 and discontinued in 2012 or 2013. So it is over at least 12 years old. Okay, so now let's ramp things up a bit. The next interface is a Presonus Audiobox 44 VSL. I got this shipped from Facebook Marketplace. I actually asked for help purchasing this one, which makes the risk way scarier when buying it, but also I don't have the exact price I got it for. It was around $60 to $70 though, I know that much. This is a more advanced interface with 4 combo 1/4 and XLR inputs. It has one control to run phantom power to all 4 of the inputs, and not only do you need your USB Type B connector, but you also need a 12 volt DC connection. It also needs to be a center positive connection and be able to supply a whole amp of power. As a guitarist, I don't really come by those kinds of power supplies often. It's been a while since I bought the system, but when I first got it, I spent hours across days trying to figure out how to get this thing to work. I even contacted Presonus support to see if they would help, but I don't think they did very much since this thing is no longer supported. I think I was using the power supply that was shipped with the unit, and I don't remember if the USB cord was also shipped with it or not, but the system only barely worked when I first had it. What did work was the indicator light. There are 3 modes that I know of for this light: steady red, steady blue, and blinking between red and blue, and I guess off if you really want to consider that one a mode. If I remember correctly, blinking means that the unit is getting power, but there is no communication through the USB cable. If the LED is off completely, it shouldn't be, and that means that the unit isn't getting power at all. Blue means that the unit is talking completely properly with the computer through the USB cable and is fully functional. And red means that it is in class compliant mode. Class compliant is a general term for devices where when they are connected, they don't need drivers or other specialty connections or setups. It should be able to communicate through the built-in features in the operating system. Personally, I have never seen a class compliant system work in its class compliant mode, so to me, that term just seems more like a sales buzzword. But with tech, there are a lot of variables that could be going wrong, so it can be hard to tell. When I connected the unit when I first got it, it was stuck in class compliant mode on my Windows 11 laptop. I did research for hours and couldn't find any solutions to get the unit to work, because it certainly wasn't working enough to send a signal to Studio One 5. I don't remember the exact details, but either it was that the 44 VSL wasn't being recognized as an input device at all, or the inputs just didn't input. Either way, I eventually gave up until I started writing this video. I mustered up my mental fortitude and pulled the unit back out again. Except when I pulled out the unit to see if I could get it back up and working again, I almost was thwarted by the power supply. While it's common for people to lose their power supplies, it's not really for me, but for some reason I didn't have the power supply with the unit. Then I remembered I have a variable DC power supply I bought for developing guitar pedals, which that one checks all the necessary boxes mentioned earlier in one configuration or another to power the unit properly. So I was able to work with it, and the holy blue light just showed up. It was just on. Just from connecting the system to my laptop. The same laptop as before. I think it may even have been the same USB cable as before since it was packed with it, but I'm not fully for sure. I don't know why it works now, but it does. No extra work required. All 4 inputs, all were able to input. I only got to use the interface for a few minutes for testing purposes, so I don't know how well a 4-mic multi-track would work, but you best believe I'm going to record some drums with this thing if it still works the next time that I plug it in. There are only 2 reasons I can think of why the interface works now and didn't before. Either the power supply wasn't the right one, or it didn't work right, or there was some sort of Windows update that actually fixed something for once and made the device compatible again, which is almost a crazy thought. So it's probably more likely the power supply. The 44 VSL was released in September of 2011 based on Google AI. I didn't quickly find a for sure answer to when it was discontinued, but development for, I think, some sort of companion software called Virtual Live Studio was discontinued on September 29th in 2015. So this unit is still around a decade old and probably at least a year or 2 older. So let's move on to our final audio interface. This is the AKAI EIE audio interface. This is not the Pro version, which I guess is supposed to be a little more stable for recording, but possibly has issues with Windows 11. I wouldn't know because this basic version is the only one I have experience with. I just heard these things from research. I got this one on OfferUp for $60 plus $12 in shipping. With tax, it came to around $76. I think I got this one before the 44 VSL, and this was the first time I was scorned by a risky purchase back in 2023. This thing looks and feels like a tank. It's pretty big compared to other interfaces. It's also a bit heavier than other interfaces, and I think it's got a decent bit more going on than your average interface. It has 4 combo 1/4 and XLR inputs, different preamp options for if you're using the line or XLR input. It also has 2 independent phantom power switches for running extra power to just 1 and 2 or just 3 and 4, which is really cool if you are a person that likes running condenser microphones and ribbon mics at the same time. It also has 2 VU meters, which are just more satisfying than digital meters in my opinion. Since there are only 2 meters, you can only use them to monitor 2 inputs at a time. Again, 1 and 2, or 3 and 4. You can also switch them to monitor the input level or the output level. The headphone jack also has a 3-way switch to monitor just 1 and 2, or 3 and 4, or all of them all together. It also has various features on the back. 2 MIDI inputs, 4 line outputs, 4 audio inserts, I don't even know what those are, and possibly one of the most useful tools, 3 USB ports. The interface is also a USB hub while it's being an interface. How cool is that? They are unfortunately only USB 1.1, but it's still kinda cool. This interface also uses not only a USB Type-B connection, but also a 6-volt center positive DC connection requiring 3 amps of power. Luckily, that was the limit of what my variable power supply was capable of, which I guess may not have been a good thing necessarily. But it's better than the power supply that was actually sent with the interface. I discovered the power brick that was shipped with my unit supplies 9 volts, 3 volts over the specified amount, and only 2.5 amps, a half amp under the specified amount. So that power brick is just all kinds of whack for this unit. So moving on, while I absolutely adore the look and feel of this interface, I despise the way it functions. I have never been able to get this thing to work, and unfortunately, it seems like a better power supply wasn't enough to save this unit. When you power it on, everything that is supposed to light up does. The input monitoring even works with the VU meters responding and even changing the lighting to red when the inputs are clipping. I really do like these meters, they just hit an untapped dopamine vein for me. But while the input is great, the output is unfortunately almost non-existent. When I first got this thing, I did research for hours trying to get it to work, and I think I may have even gotten the first 2 inputs to work, but I never got all 4. Looking back, I may have just been missing some DAW settings, but I guess that doesn't matter now, you know? So let's move on to today. I didn't spend hours on this unit this time due to having a little more knowledge about drivers and the subject of ASIO for all, or ASIO for all. A small tech and history lesson for those who don't know. Windows by default doesn't have great audio support for hardware due to Microsoft defaulting to running your audio stuff through their processing. That makes things slow down, makes the playback and sometimes the input delayed, and can create a variety of other issues. So the manufacturers have to make drivers to either work with that stuff and optimize it, or to redirect the audio stuff to not run through those other processes that slow it all down. At the pinnacle of audio drivers is ASIO. Hopefully I'm saying that right. ASIO, I think, is a system or standard that gets some of the best results for digital audio recording and such, due to it being a standard that reroutes the digital information streams to get from the source to the end as streamlined as possible. However, a manufacturer has to make the drivers, or they have to be produced one way or another. ASIO was invented by a company called Steinberg, but that same company also made a general audio driver called ASIO for All. For All was developed to work as a general audio driver for many different devices, I think specifically for ones with typically inferior drivers or just none at all, at least to my knowledge. However, ASIO and ASIO for All are not open source, even though For All is a free tool. Based on a little research, Steinberg protects this code closely, but does offer the ASIO standard to other companies with a licensing fee. I don't know how all of that works, but some companies manage to cut the corner of driver development a bit by utilizing ASIO for All. Apparently some Behringer interfaces do this, but I haven't gotten to work with any of their recording hardware, so I wouldn't personally know. But ASIO for All makes it easier for these companies to get their interfaces up and running on Windows and even have it run optimally and smoothly. The reason I bring all of this up is because this interface is one of those that cut that corner. Even though this interface didn't come in its original packaging, the seller did ship the original setup disc with it, which even says plainly printed on it, Cubase Lite 5 and ASIO for All. Oddly enough, there has to have been some sort of deal between AKAI and Steinberg, because Cubase is made by Steinberg as well. Either way, I had to learn how to make ASIO for All work, and with so much info in my head trying to think about how to make this interface work with my limited knowledge of fixes, it was frustrating to learn, but not difficult. But even once I got the ASIO for All driver up and running, something was reacting weirdly. It looked like I was getting signal through to the DAW, but the digital decibel meter in the DAW was stuttering and locking up. And when I tried to record, it made a track with what looked like nothing on it. Then it stuttered and went back and erased it. Now this is really weird because I have never seen Studio One 5 automatically delete anything. The playback head would loop back to the start for some reason and re-record over what had already been done. But normally it just overwrites the track, not completely gets rid of it. After that, I assumed I had lost and this interface was officially e-waste, but my story of this interface doesn't end there. As I was writing this script, I had a realization. I had installed the ASIO for All driver directly from the official website for ASIO for All. The current version is 2.16. However, while researching, I found a Reddit page talking about the EIE interface, and someone linked to the AKAI site where it talks about the interface and has the online resources to go with the interface. After I had already installed ASIO for All, I had downloaded and unzipped the file which revealed that the interface's ASIO for All version is 2.10. At the time, I figured I would be worse off installing the older version. However, for the sake of not wasting $75 over 2 years ago, I decided to uninstall ASIO for All and use the installer provided by AKAI themselves. I rehooked everything back up and did the installation, changed a couple settings in Studio One, and after a few minutes of testing, I found that the interface works perfectly. Keep in mind this is all on Windows 11 too, so it's not even a thing where you have to keep your Windows 10 computer offline to prevent getting hacked in a few months just to use your even older audio interface now. This is on the latest version of Windows 11, and it got phenomenal results. The audio was crisp, and the playback was almost instantaneous. Again, I only got to mess with this for a few minutes, so I don't know if it will sputter and die if I use all 4 inputs at once for some reason. But as far as I can tell, I have another working 4-input audio interface. From what I can find, this interface was released sometime in 2011 after being announced in January at the Winter NAMM show. A quick Google search doesn't show when this interface was discontinued. However, the Google AI overview says the device was discontinued before the AKAI company was acquired by another company called InMusic, which happened in 2012. But then again, the quick overview also says that it was likely discontinued sometime between the late 2000s or early 2010s, so that is a wide, unhelpful range when we know that the unit was announced in 2011. Either way, if it's true that the unit was discontinued before AKAI was acquired in 2012, we know that this unit has to be at least 13 years old or a bit older. So with all this information, what conclusion do we draw? Well, I came in expecting to be negative about the larger interfaces, expecting to talk about how time and people change things and that screws them up. However, thanks to me making this video and having the determination to do proper journalism, I got both of what I thought were now defective units to come back to life. So what I have to say is this: audio hardware is usually built to last. That's why microphones and other equipment from the 80s and earlier are still being passed around and living fulfilling lives serving their purpose. However, a lot of that stuff is all analog, especially the older its origin gets, of course. These interfaces have managed to stand the test of time, with all of them being at least 10 years old. However, none of them are actively supported, so that means the second Microsoft changes something that causes a serious incompatibility, these interfaces are done. And they are useless unless someone can make the digital connections again. But unfortunately, most of the people who are capable of doing so can't get the resources to do so, often due to proprietary information, or they just don't care enough about all of our old-ass junk to do so because they have no attachment to it. Of course, there are situations like mine where either time does mend the wounds for these units, or a little extra elbow grease gets you and your unit to the finish line. There's also the chance that if you do find a good deal, it is simply too good to be true. There's the chance someone is selling you a broken piece of hardware without disclosing it, or that someone is sending you a box of sand or brick or something. Usually online sites have protections against that stuff now, but if you are buying locally, there is always that chance if you don't test the product, and that is really scary, especially if you are a young unemployed kid or young adult like me. But based on my experience, I of course have to say that for now it is still worth it, especially if you are buying a simpler unit like a Focusrite Scarlett or a Presonus USB 96 or 24C. I do also want to add that I've seen a couple more 4-input audio interfaces throughout the years for around the $60 mark, but they have usually been developed with a connection standard that is before my time. I think I saw one or two for a connection that I don't even remember the name of or what it looked like, but there's also a few that were for FireWire. But I don't personally know anything about that and if it can even still be used. I guess there were adapters from FireWire to Thunderbolt, but apparently Mac OS 26 ended that support even with the adapter. And I don't even know about the Windows standard for that, which I guess the Windows version was called IEEE 1394. I can't see why that name didn't catch on. So that's just another factor you have to worry about, is if the connection standard is even achievable and connectable anymore. In the end, it took a lot of time passively scrolling through secondhand sites to find these deals, and lots of times of going to Goodwill in that one case. So if you do find a deal like this, be skeptical and do your research. But if you think you can make it work and feel comfortable with the risk of the price, don't let it pass you up either. You could strike gold, or maybe it'll be pyrite. But also don't go putting all your eggs into a basket of finding a deal like these, at least in the case of the 4-input audio interfaces. In my experience, these deals have hundreds of miles in between showing up, and when they do, many have been in the case of the FireWire situation, so that thins the situation out even farther. And from what I've seen, the deals have only gotten more rare. But I wish you luck, and I hope this was helpful to someone. If you enjoyed this video or found it informational, please leave a like. If you want to see more content like this, please consider subscribing and maybe even becoming a member for this channel. That's all I have to say for now, so I'm going to say bye-bye.